We're trying to stop Ragnarok, to help people. And what if the only way to do that is war?
War is not the only way.
God of War Ragnarok is slated to finish off 2022 with an absolute bang and has a fighting chance of being heralded as the best game of the year. In my previous two videos, of which are linked in the description, I discussed how God of War Ragnarok can become the best game in the franchise if it were to further refine God of War 2018's greatest qualities and further improve the areas that came up short. In this final part in this video series, we are going to be taking one last look into how God of War Ragnarok can further improve over its previous outing by not only looking at the previous game, but the entire franchise of games as a whole. So strap in, put on those nostalgia goggles, and hop through the gates of Olympus as we take a look at how God of War Ragnarok can become the best game in the franchise by learning from its storied, violent, and epic roots. The time is 2005, and God of War just released to universal acclaim on the PlayStation 2. The game was lauded for its combat, exploration, navigation, puzzle solving, and monolithic sense of scale, and it was clear that this new game would kick off one of Sony's most beloved franchises of all time. The few main bosses that God of War had were the most insane, violent, large-scale, and epic battles that had ever been done in a video game at that point, and the key aspect of what made this original game, and the several games that followed it, so significant and special was Kratos' rage. That rage was the very thing that left players hard to identify with Kratos, as by the end of the Greek saga, he had already murdered the most prolific of Greek gods. And Titans, for that matter. Okay. As great as the Blades of Chaos were to slay these prolific Greek figures, it was always exciting to see what shiny new weapons Kratos would find in his journeys throughout ancient Greek mythology. In God of War 1, we saw Kratos with the Blade of Artemis, a massive purple-infused brooding sword that could cleave through enemies with ease. Players wanting more weapons had their answers met with God of War 2 and God of War 3, sporting many more weapons for the players to use and experiment with. Similar to how God of War 2018 made strategic use of Kratos' Leviathan Axe and Blades of Chaos being strong and weak to certain enemies respectively, the old God of War games encouraged players to experiment with the variety of weapons on offer to figure out each weapon's capabilities to best tear down the mobs of foes that lay before you. The Nemean Cestus in God of War 3 absolutely decimates shielded enemies and can easily send a group of baddies flying hilariously across the map. God of War 2 has the Spear of Destiny, a unique double-sided weapon that is insane at juggling enemies and sending out a crystal AoE shockwave that is useful in both dealing with single enemies or in groups. The Claws of Hades, also in God of War 3, have an amazing moveset, with a variety of slashes and hook abilities that are absolutely savage. The most interesting ability with this weapon is its ability to rip souls out of enemies, and with a high enough level of the weapon, can summon creatures of the dead, like Cerberus, Centaur, or Medusa, just to name a few, to help you decimate your foes. I mean, how badass is that? If we can get some sort of mechanic like that in God of War Ragnarok, instant 10 out of 10, game of the year, 360 no-scope, YOLO. Now, the Leviathan Axe and the Blades of Chaos are some of the greatest weapons in the entire franchise, and the fact that these two weapons were as unique and equally essential to use in God of War 2018 is a testament to how awesome the combat is in Kratos' first bout in the Norse realms. But I don't think I'd be asking too much to see more weapons introduced in God of War Ragnarok now, would I? I mean, how cool would it be if, upon the inevitable battle with Thor, you can actually acquire and use his mythical hammer, the Mjolnir, for the rest of the game and on subsequent New Game Plus playthroughs. Being able to summon lightning and flattening enemies with a blunt weapon like this makes perfect sense in God of War, and would be a fan favorite moment for sure. Other weapons, of course, could also be introduced in God of War Ragnarok to further expand the game's arsenal and add additional layers of complexity to an already tight combat system. The older God of War games did the additional weapons right, and this design philosophy could absolutely be applied to God of War Ragnarok. Are there weapons within Norse mythology that you'd like to be able to get your hands on in God of War Ragnarok? Let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more content surrounding God of War Ragnarok and some of the biggest games in the industry. Your support goes a long way, and I sincerely think you are all rock stars for all the support I get from you. Much appreciated, fam. Now, the older God of War games in ancient Greek mythology didn't do optional content as well as God of War 2018 did, which was actually a very surprising component to it that added a dozen or so hours to the game and further expanded the endgame. This final component that I am addressing here is how God of War Ragnarok can further expand the side content and endgame content to keep players invested in the 9 realms long after the credits have rolled. Aside from trying the Give Me God of War difficulty, playing through New Game Plus, or finishing up uncompleted side quests, God of War 2018 presented additional content for players to sink their teeth into after completing the game. The Trials of Muspelheim was a fun challenge that pitted Kratos against ever-aggressive and challenging enemies to earn a rare resource to level up some of the most elite gear in the game. The volcanic wasteland setting provided an awesome new backdrop to the other realms, and I'd love to see this realm further expanded on in God of War Ragnarok, as it is confirmed that we will in fact be given access to all 9 realms this time. The poisonous realm of Niflheim proved to be a grind of sorts, as some of the best gear in the game was locked behind hours of grinding through randomly generated gauntlets of monsters and traps to secure armor and upgrade parts before succumbing to the ever-encroaching poison. This is certainly an area I hope God of War Ragnarok improves upon here, as having to grind out an area for resources is quite tiresome and began to feel more like a chore than a pleasant way to progress through and see the character and uniqueness of this realm. Hopefully, Niflheim will go away with this grindy gameplay and instead give players a better understanding of the realm and the lore that goes with it by doing something different with the realm. This leads to the final and perhaps most important part of the endgame, and that would have to be none other than the Valkyrie fights. These optional fights are incredible and task the player to display incredible proficiency with the game's combat, as each fight plays quite differently from one another. The final Valkyrie, Sigrun, is a culmination of all the Valkyries you fought before, and one that demands a thorough understanding of the game's combat and proper preparation with gear and build management. Easily the most difficult and demanding fight in the game, this endgame content was a great inclusion with the game, and although the Valkyries all looked remarkably similar and took place in equally uninspiring locations other than the final confrontation with Sigrun, it was still a worthwhile and fun endeavor that greatly extended the value of the game. If God of War Ragnarok can give us more interesting side content that taps into what makes God of War such a success, most notably its combat, exploration, navigation, and puzzle-solving elements, then I have no doubt that God of War Ragnarok will be the best entry in this long-running series, and quite possibly one of the greatest single-player games to have ever come out. In God of War 2018, there was a plethora of content to take care of in Midgard, the game's central and main realm. And if God of War Ragnarok can spread that kind of love and attention to all of its 9 realms in the upcoming game, how could this not be an incredible recipe for success? Rumored to be the biggest game in the franchise by a good mile, hopefully this hope for a lengthier campaign and side content will be fulfilled, and I couldn't be more excited for this game to come out. So as we wrap up this video, I'd like to say that God of War as a franchise has blessed us with some of the tightest combat, well-realized locations, and incredible storytelling in the industry, and we have a lot to enjoy and to learn from this incredible series. As a result, I'd like to ask you, what are you most looking forward to in God of War Ragnarok? Are there other aspects of the series past that you'd like to see focused on more in God of War Ragnarok? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I invite you once again to hit that like and subscribe button for more God of War content and for other previews, reviews, and tips and tricks videos surrounding the latest and greatest games in the industry. Thank you all for the incredible support. You rock, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Peace!